All right, today we're diving into a really powerful and, let's be honest, pretty challenging essay called The Appalachian Gorilla. It's a deep critique of the modern world, but it also sketches out a very detailed, very different vision for how we could live. Let's get into it. So the essay kicks right off with a huge confrontational idea. What if our modern world, with all its so-called choices, isn't really about freedom at all? What if it's actually a carefully built trap? The author wants us to really question the ground beneath our feet. And here's what the author means by the trap. It's this cycle, right? You work your whole life until you're old. You trade your paper money for cheap stuff made by other people stuck in the same system. And all the while, a huge chunk of what you earn just goes straight to the government. Okay, so let's really dig into this first major theme, the argument that our entire socioeconomic system is fundamentally broken and doesn't really offer a way out. The claim here is that the choices we think we have, get a corporate job, work in the service industry, they all just lead back to the same place, the same cycle of working constantly for less and less real return. Even moving to another country, the author says, often just means plugging into a slightly different, maybe even tougher version of the exact same machine. Now, to illustrate this point, the author brings up the Amish. They have this thing called Rumspringa, where their teenagers go out and experience the modern world. And the interesting part, most of them choose to go back. So the essay asks a really sharp question. If our world is so great, why do people who get a real, genuine choice so often say, no thanks? So if we are in a trap, how in the world did we get here? Well, the author doesn't think it was an accident. They lay out a specific history, 100 years of what they call wrong turns, that built the world we live in today. And here's the author's timeline of how it happened. It starts back in the Gilded Age, with giant industries and the first real oligarchs. Then comes the Progressive Era, which brought in government experts, technocrats, to manage this new, complex system. After World War II, there's this incredible boom, a period of real prosperity. But then, the author says, the 1970s hit. And that's the big turning point, when jobs started getting shipped overseas and the whole financial system began to change, moving from stable pensions to risky 401ks. And what were the results of these changes? Well, according to the essay, it's a pretty grim picture. Unions got crushed, families became less stable, government debt went through the roof, and the suburbs, they became, in the author's words, just nurseries for corporate drones. It all adds up to what they call a society of diseased ants. But after painting this very bleak picture, the author pivots. They don't just complain. They propose a whole slate of massive, radical solutions designed to tear down the current system and build something new. First on the chopping block, the tax code. The author describes our current system as this impossibly complex web of taxes: federal, state, local, property, sales, you name it. The proposal? Get rid of almost all of it. Replace it with just one thing, a 25% national sales tax. That's it. And right at the core of that reform is a huge game-changing idea. Completely get rid of property taxes for anyone who owns their own home. So why do this? Well, the reasoning is layered. For one, the author says it would stop local governments from constantly trying to price out poorer people to get higher tax revenues. Two, it means you can truly own your home, free and clear. But maybe the biggest reason is stability. It breaks the link between having a job and keeping your house. You could retire, get sick, take time off, and you wouldn't have to live in fear of losing a home you've already paid for. The next big idea is to make growing your own food a fundamental right. The author points out that this is something that's only protected in a couple of states right now, and they want to change that for everyone. And why is this so important? Well, the argument is that it tackles a bunch of problems at once. It could help with the national health crisis, it builds stronger local food supplies that aren't so fragile, it would cut our dependence on industrial farming, which the author claims uses 10 calories of oil to produce just 1 calorie of food, and maybe just as important, it reconnects people with their actual environment. The essay then moves into even more controversial ideas, proposing an end to two major institutions, our current child support system and mandatory schooling. The author sees both of these as systems that can destabilize families and argues they just aren't working as intended anymore. Now you might be thinking, wow, these are some drastic proposals. And they are. But the author justifies them by pointing to numbers like this: 100,000 overdose deaths every year. They see this as a clear symptom of a society that's under an incredible amount of stress, a society that needs a lot more than just a few minor tweaks. For the author, this problem isn't just about money or laws. It's actually a philosophical one.
The core argument is that we've lost our connection to what's real, and we're all living inside these artificial worlds we've built for ourselves.
And you can see the contrast right here. On one side, you have what the author calls false paradigms. The perfect families on TV, the flawless lives on social media, the belief that legal contracts are ironclad. And on the other side is what the author calls reality. The raw, basic truths like fear of the law, the stress of not having enough money, our fundamental biological needs, and the simple fact that sometimes the machine just breaks.
The author uses this quote, which they reference from the movie Platoon, to really hammer this point home. It's about the choice we all make. Do we use things to escape from the hard truths of the world, or do we face them head-on and become part of that reality ourselves? The essay argues our whole society is now built on escape. So in this great escape from reality, what have we actually lost? The author's claim is that we've lost something deep, our heritage, our culture, our connection to a specific place. And without that solid ground to stand on, all that's left to fight for, to live for, is just buying more stuff. So where does this all go from here? The final part of the essay isn't about solutions so much as it's about what the author sees as an inevitable moment of crisis and the very few paths we have left to choose from.
The author basically lays out 3 possible futures. The first path is a peaceful separation of the country, a sort of national divorce based on geography and culture. The second path is the opposite, a much stronger, more authoritarian government, probably using things like universal basic income to keep people compliant as freedoms disappear. And the third path? A government that actually leads the charge back to localism, doing the very things the essay proposes, like ending property taxes and bringing jobs back home. In the end, the Appalachian guerrilla doesn't claim to have the perfect answer. What it does is present a powerful and, to many, a compelling case that the system as we know it is fundamentally broken. And it leaves us, the readers, with the biggest and most unsettling question of all: if that's true, what do we build next?